Okay, let's get right into this because this is kind of important. I've noticed that there are some parallels between what Republicans want, what they talk about when it comes to Social Security benefits, and kind of the direction going into the future with the general Trump desires, which are not always linear with what the Republicans want in general. Now, Trump might be pressured going into the future to do this particular Social Security change because it's linear with what states are using on the Republican side at the state level. Now, what if the SSA, and I'm just going to give you the thing right up front because I know that there are some audience members who have that squirrel capacity. So they're like, you got to tell me within the first 5 seconds what's going on. What if the SSA forced people to attempt to work who were on disability benefits in order to prove that they were still truly disabled? Sounds horrible. Sounds absolutely, oh my gosh, I can't believe that. How could that be? But let me walk you through it real quick. It sounds ridiculous. It somewhat is, but there's a silver lining to it. Let's be fair with this. There are people who will never work while on disability benefits. They can't. It's just not going to happen. There are also people who absolutely are on disability benefits that could work a 9 to 5 job. Absolutely, without a doubt. That's why they have three categories of CDRs, continuing disability reviews. That's where they review somebody to basically go ahead and see if they're still severely impaired under the rules and regulations. Now, this is straight from basically, I've got it right here, straight from the USDA website. SNAP statewide able bodied adults without dependent waivers effective immediately for eligible states. All right, so what you want to listen to is able bodied adults without dependent waivers. Okay, so the recently enacted American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009, right? So remember 2008, that was a giant collapse, which was signed by President Obama on February 17th, 2009, suspends restrictions on able bodied adults without dependent participating in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program as of April 1st, 2009, continuing through September 30th, 2010, unless state agencies choose to impose specific work requirements. Now, let me walk you through what that kind of means. Basically, the federal group can pass a law, and then the state group can pass a law on top of that. It just has to be more specific. It just can't change the underlying federal law. And so the whole thing here is the feds passed a rule that said, hey, you individuals out there that are able bodied, maybe you shouldn't be receiving certain types of assistance unless you try to go find a job. So, just to go straight to Florida DCF website, which is of course a Republican-based state, on June 3rd, 2023, the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023, and this is straight from the DCF website, was signed into federal law, which brings significant changes to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Work requirements. Okay, so basically the idea is Florida said, hey, if you want to get this benefit, these food stamps, you got to work or at least attempt to find a job. One key change involves able bodied adults without dependents. So that's the ABAWDs. Those are the important people here. And so it's the whole defining of able bodied adults. Now, the age range for an able bodied adult without a dependent has been expanded from age 49 to now include adults through age 52 on October 1st, 2023. And again, expanded from the age 52 to now includes adults through age 54 on October 1st, 2024. So you can see in Florida, Republican state, they keep raising the age that they are requiring people to have to try and go find work, right? That are also potentially, needing to receive these food stamps. Now, with that said, the FRA introduced new exemption categories for these able-bodied adults without dependents that include. So these people are now exempt: homeless individuals, veterans, and former foster youth. Now, with homeless individuals in Florida, those experiencing homelessness are now exempt. Veterans, all veterans, regardless of discharge conditions, are exempt, including reserve component service, and former foster youth, individuals aged 24 or younger who were in foster care on their 18th birthday or later, are now exempt. So the bottom line is you're seeing how Florida is figuring out who they can put back to work and who basically they want to go ahead and just give an exemption to. In addition to the able bodied adult without dependent age expansion mandated by the FRA, Florida has expanded the age of individuals subject to mandatory work requirements. Individuals aged 55 through 59 who do not meet an exemption are required now to participate in the SNAP employment and training program. These individuals will be referred to as mandatory work participants. Mandatory work participants, right? 55 through 59. So they just keep raising the age, raising the age. I'm sure it'll hit the 60s shortly. All right. Now, the bottom line is this: they've posted things on their website about how you could be notified, what you have to do, where you have to go onto the website to basically prove that you've attempted to find a job and do the job. Let me read to you some of it. A mandatory work participant must meet the work requirements each month to continue to receive food assistance benefits, even if you are already meeting these requirements. The Career Source Center will still contact you so your hours can be tracked. Work requirements for a mandatory work participant to continue receiving food assistance benefits are registered for work at the time of application and every 12 months thereafter, participate in the ENT program if assigned, give the Career Source Center information regarding your employment status or availability for work, report to an employer if referred, accept a valid offer of suitable employment, not voluntary and without good cause, quit a job of 30 or more hours a week or reduce work hours to less than 30 hours a week. So basically, you want to get food stamps, you're forced to find a job unless you find one of those, unless you fall into one of those exemptions. Although some people, they've kind of gamed the system with showing that they applied for jobs but didn't actually really make an effort. Although they're getting better at not allowing that. Now, here's the thing. The Social Security Administration currently uses three categories. Again, three categories for individuals that they review to kick them off of disability benefits. The three categories are medical improvement expected, medical improvement possible, and then the bigger one is basically your medical improvement not expected, right? That's the one you want to end up in, the MINE. The first one, the medical improvement expected, the MIE, is basically where every 6 to 18 months they do a review. Your medical condition is expected to improve, anticipated to have, conditions or treatment go ahead and render you to be in a better position. Like, for example, if you are recovering from surgery or temporary disability conditions like fractures or specific injuries. Now, with that said, if you fall into this lesser category of medical review where you are improving, then it is expected that you have to show that you are still as severe as you were or that you're more severe than you were. If you fall into these other categories, medical improvement possible, every 3 years, like a manageable, condition or a mental health condition or chronic illness that might stabilize, they're looking at every 3 years of reviewing you. So it's not as likely that you'll improve. But going back to the top category, medical improvement expected every 6 to 18 months, they want to review. Then in that instance, you basically are set up for potential requirements from the SSA. Let's talk about that real quick. What if they created the SSA another category called medical improvement likely, the MIL category? What if they created this category? This category would be for those that basically are the least likely to pass a continuing disability review. And as a part of it, they gave them work incentives and options to find a way beyond benefits. Now, remember, back in the day, you go 20 years ago, it was very easy to get onto disability benefits. It was way easier than it is now. You still get people who were on benefits 20 years ago being like, oh, as long as you're disabled, you'll be fine. Then you're like, well, what's fine just disabled? Oh, just really bad, really severe. And, they're out there playing basketball and riding horses into the sunset. But the point is, back in the day, it was much easier to get on benefits. And also, back in the day, the system wasn't as aggressive at kicking people off. So, when you got on disability benefits 30 years ago, 40 years ago, that was for life. That was it. You could have, realistically had improvement, but they weren't really taking a look at a lot of these. Now they become more and more aggressive at kicking people off. So let's say that they created this other, category. So instead of three categories, now you've got four categories, right? Four categories. And now you've got an MIL category called medical improvement likely. Now, the bottom line is, I'm sure forcing the disabled to try and work sounds pretty horrific. It sounds very immoral. It sounds very unethical. But for those not in the industry representing people, they don't realize that there's another side to that coin. Having people appeal the decision. So let's say that you have disability benefits And then all of a sudden you get a notice that says you're going through a CDR. And then all of a sudden the notice that comes back after, I don't know, 6 to 18 months says, hey, we don't actually think that you are de facto as disabled, as you were back in the day, right? So you're sitting there going, what? It's impossible, blah, 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 right? And then the bottom line is, you have to kind of keep in mind that 2025 is the mass resurgence of doing CDRs. 2024, they mostly cut out doing CDRs because they didn't have enough employees. So what they said was, okay, in 2025, we're going to move these people we moved to working on that backlog back over to CDRs. And now, of course, the backlog has surged to 1.12 million people backlog overload waiting for benefits. So the thing is, 2025, you're going to be seeing a lot more CDRs. Now, with that said, I know you guys think it's completely unethical and how dare they and yada, yada, yada. But consider this. You get a lot of disabled people who basically have had medical improvement. Their doctors won't support them to say that they're as disabled as they were. And what happens is those individuals, they believe no matter what, that they're still disabled at the regulatory requirements for the SSA, marked impairments or meet, equal, or exceed a listing, get a compassion allowance listing, a grid out, or a vocational allowance. So the thing you got to keep in mind with this whole situation is, okay. There are some of those individuals in the system. And then when they're found to be not that severely impaired under the 8-step sequential process, the 8 elements, right, that you go through when they adjudicate whether or not you're still disabled. What happens is that person goes, "No, there's no way. How dare they? How dare they?" And then they get 10 days to call the SSA back once they tell them they're not disabled and they say, "Hey, I want to keep my benefits going. I'm going to appeal this," right? So then they go through appeal after appeal after appeal after appeal. And then at that point, they lose it. They lose the final appeal. They can't find an attorney to represent them because the attorney reviewed the medical evidence. The medical evidence shows that the person's not that disabled anymore. And boom, they go through all this. Now they have a massive overpayment that is due basically to the Social Security Administration, which is then due to the US Treasury. So basically, you have a person that could do some work, but the ramp into doing work is basically a giant loan to the United States Treasury, which is like the worst kind of loan you can have. Like when you have one of those, like that's no matter what, they're coming for the money. So what I've realized is that with this situation, there are individuals who the SSA could potentially work with to try and get them to go back to work, but the SSA doesn't. Now with the VA offers all kinds of try this out. Have you tried this group? Have you tried this area for employers? They have lots of things to try and help get you back up on your feet, etc. But that's not the SSA. The SSA just has little programs here and there about potentially finding some sort of employment. The main one is, of course, the Ticket to Work program, which basically, they have like a little employment group you can go to where people are offering jobs to the disabled. In my opinion, for each person going through a CDR, they need to offer, right, a bounce option to some sort of work program that mirrors in similarity that of the Ticket to Work program. And here's why. If you don't allow that person to try, they will end up with a massive debt to the US Treasury if found not disabled after all of their appeals, which puts them in a far worse spot than basically, where they were before. Now, people can have the right to completely reject this, but it should be in all the documentation that goes out when they're doing the review and not just the one little paragraph they think, they put in about work options, yada, yada. It needs to be a whole program, kind of like the Ticket to Work program, and it needs to just be specific for the CDR situation. Now, with that said, when they lose their final appeal, massive back pay amount that's due, they'll never be able to pay it back in the immediate sense, and then they're forced with immediate get a job or become homeless, and basically, massive debt on their shoulders due to the US Treasury. So it's a tough situation, a very tough situation. The job market has changed. I don't mean like we went from shoeing horses to coal mines. I mean like a lot of jobs out there are able to be done by disabled people that are less limited by their impairments. You got a lot of disabled people. They're never going to work. It ain't going to happen. But there's a category of them where they could potentially work. data entry jobs with flex schedules, tester jobs where basically, you're testing out programs, you're testing out video games, you're running through a particular thing, trying to find faults in the programming. There are a lot of options now that never existed before. And a lot of that's due to laptops. You ever sit there and think, "Oh, okay, we go back 30 years, there weren't laptops like that. The earliest laptops, they were huge. And then they got to those really weird little white laptops where the screen had a ball on the side of them. I mean, you remember that goes way back to like IBM stuff. What scares me about Trump with this whole situation is that he needs to keep all of these Republicans, moderately happy. And so buying through that, the Republicans can sometimes ramp up a program that's aggressive to make people go back to work because, Republicans live and breathe on the work idea. You work, you have, priorities towards yourself, priorities towards others, and you're meeting those by fulfilling, self absorption of need and basically achieving a monthly check. But at the end of the day, sometimes they don't really get the humanity part of it, which is that not everybody wants to be a wake up in the early part of morning and, forced to go to work. So as a result of that, the Republicans kind of sometimes affix to a part of the generation, and some of that part of the generation are what they say they are. And they'll say, okay, well, that person's lazy, or that person doesn't want to work, or that person, da 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 da, and so on and so forth. And that's true. Some individuals, they don't want to work, but they can work. I'm not saying that's untrue. It is true. But we don't have the programs set up for those individuals that are going to be kicked off of disability benefits. Now, here's the thing, the programs to kick people off of disability benefits, right? There's a lot of options that they have there. And my concern is that, you get an aggressive Republican style individual in there, and automatically they're going to be kicking off people left and right, and then using this as a, well, you didn't find a job, you need to get a job, as the methodology for it. My concern there is that they go full Florida with it on that particular item for disabled people. And here's why. Disabled people, with their brain, they believe that they are disabled. And with their brain, disabled means they can't do stuff. Sometimes they make connection between they can't work, sometimes they don't. But the idea is they can't do stuff. And it's really, they can't work a full-time job, which is why they're disabled. And just going one step deeper, if you can't work a full-time job at the base minimum wage, then you can't be able to afford housing. And then we give them a check. Like, that's the whole idea there. So the thing that you have to keep in mind is that this would be something that would be, I think, tough in the current economic situation, right? So we're January, at the very end of January of 2025. There are jobs out there, but there's not as many as there needs to be for disabled people to be very successful with easily finding some sort of part-time gig that they can grow into a full-time gig if they're likely to basically improve to the point where they no longer need benefits. So the thing you have to keep in mind is the SSA is just, when it comes to their rules and regulations, they're not on top of where they need to be with structured programs for getting people to try out vocational options. Now, I know the 9-month trial work period. I know the extended eligibility period. I know the ticket to, work program. And then there's a bunch of other little programs like the ticket to work program that are offshoots. But the bottom line is, and I pose this to you, of those who are watching this video that are disabled, how much do you know about work incentives from the SSA? And many of you have a very, cursory, not very deep knowledge of it, because it's not something that the SSA promotes. And I feel like the Republicans are going to swoop in rather on that. And remember, this is because Trump has to basically go ahead and make, traditional Republicans feel good, establishment Republicans, fiscal conservatives, social conservatives, libertarians, populists, neoconservatives, moderate conservatives, Tea Party Republicans, MAGA Republicans, and then you have, like, the right wing Republicans, So my point with this is, and I think this is incredibly important, you know, a lot of you were probably thinking, "Oh no, this is absolutely a horrible thing, a terrible thing." It already is beginning. So the first thing you have to understand is that the SSA is going to be doing something like this at some point where they go deeper into making more disabled try and find a vocation. And I'm thinking now that you've watched the video, you're probably thinking, okay, I can see how this thing is creeping into the existence of it. Because, back in the day, you go back 30 years, like SSA wasn't spending a lot of time picking people off of disability benefits like they are now, right? The SSA didn't even have OIG CDR division. That whole creation of these CDI divisions, that whole creation of CDI divisions, right? The people that go and investigate you and follow you around, that whole creation was really ramped up as a result of the 2001 fraud that occurred from firefighters, policemen in the tri-state area, specifically when replying to the 9/11 twin towers falling, and all the fraud of those individuals. They were getting a check from their firefighter job, their police job, and social security check. They basically were, they were catching people going on jet skis and riding horses, literally. And then the SSA came out and said, hey, you're posting all these pictures saying, you're able to do these things. And then, we found your doctor's notes weren't consistent. Hey. So the point that I'm getting at is the SSA is tightening up. And that's just one of those situations. Now, remember, I tend to make videos that are 6 to 12 months ahead of where something is going. I get people screaming at me about an idea, and then 9 months later they call me back to ask what's coming after that, because I realized I wasn't trying to hurt them or harm them. I was just telling them ahead of time, hey, guess what? Things are leaning this way. Things are going this way. So I just wanted to tell you, the point with this is that Republicans, they tend to want a slim government. And that also doesn't change with Social Security. But I think if we are all realistic about this, at the end of the day, just to be fair, we need to be thinking about what changes the Republicans potentially may be making going forward. Because remember, when Trump says, hey, I'm not going to change Social Security, the moment the next commissioner gets in, the commissioner is going to be changing Social Security left and right. That's the job of being the commissioner of the SSA. They got to go ahead and make it work with every year that comes up and things change. So remember, the passing of the WEP and the GPO significantly reduces the lifespan of the trust funds. So there are going to be some back and forth discussions on how this is all going to be paid for. Remember, a penny saved versus a penny spent. If the government gets people off of benefits who are most likely to improve, then the government saves some pennies to offset the new costs of the GPO and WEP recipients. Trump will be expected to jump in and say oil will pay for everything. Yeah, maybe, but magically, three oil platforms, how this goes when he's in. There's Pharaoh leveling situations. Three, oil platforms will have massive leaks, fires, environmental situation, the price of a barrel will, fly upwards. Just saying, be smart and ahead of it. That's where I'd like you to be with this situation, one step ahead, especially when people are relying on the check and have no other plans set up. And what I mean by that is go learn about the SSA work programs, go learn about what's in your medical record. I get people all the time who basically say to me, like, oh, I'm super impaired, I'm super disabled. And I say to them, oh, wow, okay, understood. When was the last time you read your medical record? Oh, I've never read my medical record. I just know that they say this in the meetings. Okay, well, if you've never read your medical record, how do you know what the trajectory of your severity, mild, moderate, severe, extreme, is on the timeline? And they don't know. So my point with this video is there's probably something going on that will be something like this. You need to be ahead of the ball. You need to make sure that you're getting, residual functional capacity forms filled out by your doctor saying you are severe, as the, disabled claimant that you are. You need to basically make sure that you're looking at the statute language for the listing level criteria to make sure that you are, showing consistent with the record of what the SSA expects, symptoms and signs related to that documentation. You need to make sure that you've set yourself up for success, because it is my belief that, 4 years of Republicans in the Social Security Administration, you're going to be seeing things that promote the identity of the least disabled on the program finding work alternatives. Now, does this make Trump out to be an evil person? No. It is the ideology of Republicans to get people back to work. It is the direction of Republicans to have a nation of working people. That's one of the big problems that, the Republicans have with all these immigrants that came into the country is that they don't believe many of them will be working. Because let me explain, if the Republicans felt that all these immigrants were going to come into this country and get to work, the Republicans would have fought the Democrats to keep the immigrants because they would have said, look at this. Look at all the tax dollars. Look at all the hard work. Look at all the this and the that and the completing this job and doing that. It won't just be picking oranges. So the point that I'm getting at is you have to understand what these programs are. And I'll do a video specifically on what all the different work programs are within the SSA. But you have to know, are you as severe as your medical documentation was back in the day? What are the things you need to do to improve your standing as a severely impaired person? And what are the actual vocational assistance programs the SSA offers so that at the end of the day, you have mastered all the things that could potentially threaten your check? And that's what I think is the most important. And I know I'm going to get a lot of people screaming at me. They'll scream in the comments, how dare you, all that stuff. I get that. I get that. I totally get that. But remember, I tend to make videos that are like 6 to 12 months, sometimes 2 to 3 years before the thing pops up. I mean, literally, I'm going to be doing a video on, topics that I think are absolutely ridiculous, but the more I sit back and think about it, are kind of relevant. Like, for example, what technologies, like alien technologies, like things that exist out there that we just don't have access to, exist that could help the disabled? I mean, do you ever sit back and think about what technologies exist that would change the entire platform of disability benefits? I mean, do you ever think about like, nanotechnology that they could put into the body to repair things? You ever think about levitation options where basically, you could levitate or have the weight of a body part no longer be restricted by a joint? You ever think about that stuff? Because in the future, a lot of that's going to become relevant in a relatively short amount of time. So just something to think about. We're going to cover that stuff, although that's way down the line of what's going to happen in the future. So anyways, I will catch you guys at the next video. Where we will be covering a pretty cool topic there. I will put in the chat section the link to the next video. Attorney Walter Hnot. And the next video is going to be really short because I have to get on phone calls to help back office out. But please remember to like and subscribe. Hit that like button. Don't be afraid to hit the like button. Also, head over to Google and type in Disability Resolution Law Firm or Disability Resolution Florida. And basically go ahead and throw some stars up there. I always appreciate that. With that said, I go live to answer questions on Monday and Thursday. So tonight I'll probably be live to answer questions for free about disability law. I'm America's most, subscribed to, most viewed disability attorney. With that said, if you have a private question, like it's going to take an hour for me to figure out what's going on and then give you like a structured approach as to what you need to do. In the link below, there's a contract. Use that to get your private session. All right. I'll catch you a little bit later. And bottom line is we're going to go straight to the next video in about 5 minutes. Attorney Walter Hnot, I will catch you shortly at the next video. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.